wherever you want to be, you belong. And if you don't, you can go. The world is not, you don't owe the world nothing. All you need to do is take care of yourself and the people around you, and you'll be good. That's what I've learned. That's the alternative. That's really the alternative.
Hi, and welcome to Town Hall, a Black queer podcast, where we journey through a theme by sharing stories, music, poetry, and art of varying depth and hilarity. Today's episode is Alternatively Black. And we have a special guest host filling in for Bob today. He is a director and writer, and he's one of the producers on the pod. Please welcome Cory Nixon. Hey, Cory.
Hey, Miss Peppermint. Thank you for having me.
Oh my gosh, it feels so weird. I mean, thank you for being here, but I mean, you're literally here every single time. People just don't see your face or hear your voice usually. But now they get a chance to hear what we get to hear every single time.
Yeah. Y'all turn my mic up.
That's right. That's right. Now sing. It's surprise karaoke. Could you imagine?
I cannot hold a note, even if I tried.
Now I really want to hear.
At all.
Well, so I'm happy that you're here with us. Now you tell folks a little bit about you, just so they can get a feel for who you are. Get to know you.
Okay, here we go. I'm a director. I'm a writer. I'm an activist as well. I produce this podcast, which is so important to me. I feel like archiving these stories for our community so that they live forever and ever and ever is just such a gift that I get to be a part of. And working with you and Bob, it really is. It's been life-changing and thought-provoking, and so thank you.
Oh, babe. Well, I'm glad that you're here, and on this, podcast and everything we've been doing in general with Black Queer Town Hall has been life-changing for myself as well. So, and I hope that we are bringing new perspectives to everybody, or nude, whatever, who's listening to the podcast. We hope that you like it, and we hope that you will share this and get your friends to listen to it and introduce it to as many people as possible. Because, even though, despite the name, and I know we say this every week, but despite the name, this isn't just for Black folks to listen to. You know what I mean? Like if you're, a lady in a grocery store who's going to go up to somebody to tell them about their hair, maybe you might learn that that's not the right thing to do. Hopefully you've heard that before at this podcast. But nevertheless, I'm sure that there's something that we can all gain from listening to podcasts like this one that try to offer different types of perspectives. And so that's what we're going to do today. Literally, Alternatively Black. I mean.
Right. What does that mean to you, Pep?
I don't know. I think Alternatively Black, literally, when we're talking in the context of Black folks, we're probably talking about a type of Black person that's different than, what you might think of as the norm, what people might expect. And I think it has more to do, I don't know, maybe it has a lot to do with like an alternative mode of thinking. Certainly alternative circumstances can make circumstances and experiences can give someone a different perspective, for sure. And when I think of Alternatively Black, I think of, the one of the first things I think of is an experience that a lot of, and maybe this is a coincidence, but a lot, not all, but a lot of the queer Black folks that I know share a sort of parallel with each other, that we had been teased in our youth and childhood for speaking too white. And that is, I know exactly what that is. When we're saying speaking too white, I think people are referring to the fact that we're using complete sentences and speaking in, English, proper English. And
right.
And, that's a lot to unpack. But it's not, I don't want to just saddle that on Black folks for completely adopting this narrative that, to be Black is to speak in a way that sounds uneducated or speak in a way that isn't using proper English. Because in our history, we do have a history. Most of our time in this history, we weren't able legally to read, and weren't able to attend this. Certainly didn't have access to the same learning tools that other folks in this country have, namely white folks in this country. And so it's no surprise that some of the descendants of the people who you barred from having books and getting education, are still dealing with some of the ramifications of that. And so, yes, but I digress. Speaking white is one of the things that I've always heard. And I do think it's a shame, but it just shows that there are different modalities and different thought and different views that Black people hold. And, we even if you're somebody who's from the inner city, whatever, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have the same goals. It doesn't mean that you have the same experiences. And so I spoke a lot about it, but that's my thought. What does alternatively Black mean to you?
I think, well, first of all, when we were like brainstorming this episode, I think I personally was like, alternatively Black alternative. Like, we have to name it correctly because they're going to come for us.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I was like, I wanted it. We wanted it to mean what it is. But also with that, like, what does that even, like, what is alternatively Black? Like, we are not, I think so often in the media and like, who we see on the streets, we're told to be one way. Like, you can only be this one form of Black person.
Yeah. That's
and like,
what they'll accept.
It's just not right. And that's not the case. From all the Black people I know and have met and have raised me, that's just, we are all so different and unique. And so to be constantly told that like, alt Black, it's like, no, we're just Black like that. And like, we like different things, we like different musics, we speak different ways. That doesn't mean that we're this like subcategory of Black person. Like, I'm Black, period. Like, always.
Yeah, that is really interesting. And I think it also speaks a lot to the expectations of people who may or may not be Black, but just expectations of other people on what they will accept from a Black person.
Right.
And I think Bob and I learned a lot about that, or experienced a lot of some of that. This most recently, there was a moment or two online, conversation or two online that was happening, that basically called into the conversation was trying to call into question the Blackness of just drag entertainers, for example, who date white folks. And, I think it was an important, I think the topic is an important conversation to discuss. But I think it's important to frame it in why is it that anybody may feel the pressure to or not to date outside their race, or like what is it that people might be thinking or doing, and how does that connect with their idea of their own Blackness and the choices that they make in their partners. And then why is it that we're questioning those things, And so, but that, I think it just feels, I don't know that many. I mean, I don't, Black is the only, racial identity that I hold and carry, but it sucks when we hear that people are trying to revoke your Black card, because it's just not possible.
Right.
Like, why is it that others can't, like, I can't trade it in? I'm not that I'm trying, but like, why is it that people are trying to, it's only when people are trying to use it as a weapon against you to take your Black card.
And who are you? Who are you to take my Black card? Like, first of all, I do want to say that, like, you pointed out the interracial relationships, and girl, that's our next episode. But
yes, teaser.
But teaser. Okay, because the girls need to get together. We need to get the girls together and learn. But also, I feel that, like, who are you to try to take my black card away as a black person? There is so much anti-blackness and, like, white supremacy built in that.
Mm.
Like, instead of, like, lifting one another up and praising one another, like, who I choose to love, even, like, if it's a man, if it's a white man, you're saying, like, oh, you're not black enough, you talk this way, and I too was teased for, like, speaking correctly, and, like, or not correctly, excuse me, but the English that I used, I was teased for. And then it's like, you can't take my black card away from me. You can't take my black experience away from me, because I am who I am and I've had the experiences that I've had that will never go away.
Yeah, well said. And the fact that we're not even in these conversations, at least the ones that I've heard and been privy to, we're not even you taking people's actions and their contributions to the community, things that they do at all into consideration. It's just, oh, who you date? Okay, you're not black. Or how you speak? Okay, well, then you're not black. And it's really just like these sort of superficial things that really have a lot less to do with the core, the person, who they are at their core. You know, I'm still the same person, the same thoughts and ideas and everything, regardless of the way that I'm speaking or what language I'm speaking, and regardless of who I may be dating or not, things like that. And so, like, it's a shame that those are more important sort of descriptors of someone's blackness and points of proof of someone's blackness, you know?
Now, you said something that was brilliant. You said, like, and I want to go deeper into that because I think it's great. You were like, you're the same person, even though who you're dating, what, all of that. And it's like, I'm thinking that people who are calling out people for, oh, I'm taking your black card, are thinking, like, just because you're dating a white person means that, like, you're not black all the time. You know what I mean?
That's
like,
what they mean.
They're, which means, right, but, like, who are you? You are not God, and you don't know what I do behind closed doors. It is truly crazy in 2023.
People are running wild out here. We got lots of stories about it, including our very first guest. Would you like to introduce our first guest and do the honors, since you are our honorary host?
Yes. Okay, so our first guest is Cleo. Cleo is a Caribbean educator. She runs a Black and Indigenous two-spirit education program. She is polyamorous and educates folks on healthy relationships and conflict resolution and how to deal with jealousy. And also, she's an alt-Black female punk in New York City and just was in that scene. Yes, and was, like, in the Afro-punk scene. So, let's hear some more from Cleo.
Hi, everyone. My name is Cleopatra TataBele. I am someone who is Black, Taino, Two-Spirit, and I love the alternative scene. I grew up in New York City. I am born and raised in the city. It's something that I've always felt really proud of. Growing up, there was always this idea that, like, being punk is not a Black thing, like, that's white people shit. And that's, like, completely not true. Like, Blackness is inherently punk, Blackness is resistance. And so when I hear people say stuff like that, especially when I was really young, like, say I was, like, in middle school, which is, like, the worst time for everybody, people were not accepting of people who were different from them. And that was really something that hurt me growing up a lot. It made me feel like not proud of who I am until I started seeing other people who were Black, who were role models, who were in the scene, who were able to, like, have more visibility. For me, growing up, it was always, like, kind of taboo to, like, want to wear spikes, want to have piercings, want to look a certain way, want to act a certain way. But for me, it's just, like, self-expression, and I didn't really have that space to grow that until I was a little bit older. I think a lot of kids thought Blackness just had to be one certain specific way. The younger you are, the less you are exposed to, versus the older you are, the more you're exposed to, the more things you feel like you can create in your life. And as a young kid in New York City, especially in majority Black spaces or majority Black schools. It was really hard because people were projecting what white supremacy told them to project instead of expressing themselves as who they want to be. But I just remember in high school, I was just like, fuck that shit. Like, I'm literally gonna just do me. And like, people were way more accepting. My self esteem was better. And in New York City, what's really powerful is that the punk scene, a lot of it is all ages. Like, you are able to literally go out to a show and be 14. There was this paper, like a monthly newsletter that was in print that was called the show paper. And I don't know if it's still in existence, but I just remember like fiending for that when I was 15, like finding it every month and like seeing all, like, it was the point of the show paper was to share all the all age punk shows, all of them. And so, like, somebody like me who was 15, 16 in New York City, I had the agency to like go out to events and go see musicians that I was really passionate about. I started finding like more and more Black people, especially around when Afropunk was still a little more punk and starting to get a little popular. Before it was like super popular and really had a lot more punk bands, it was really beautiful seeing so many Black alternative people that like really were there for the music. If I went with a group of friends, people of color specifically, it was really fun. I had a great time. But even at punk shows, like, some punk shows are dead ass filled with Nazis, and like, it could be really dangerous depending on where you go. Honestly, now I feel like there was a lot of BLM uprisings when I was in college, like a decade ago, and also in the beginning of COVID, and it makes it so then when I go to certain spaces, people are a little bit more aware. Like, some places even have like POC, tickets or something like that to help it be more accessible and not just like, oh, punks who can afford to be in here could be in here. There's little things like that that I'm like, this did not exist when I was young and really trying to go out more. After I grew up a little bit, started being able to have access to mental health care, started being able to like have access to looking the way I want and growing into myself. I really started to be a little more intentional about the spaces I went to. The first time I went to Black Punk, which is different than Afropunk, Black Punk had a music festival. It was like maybe 10 bands, and all of them were either Black led or POC led. I was in a room of punk folks that were Black. I was just like, whoa, like, I've literally never experienced this. Like, I've gone to shows and there'll be like a handful of people of color, maybe some Black people too. But like, it was rare to literally be in a room surrounded by people who look like you, who enjoy the music that you do. Most of the time, it's white as hell. So with Black Punk, they had a music festival. I think it was 2 days. I was only able to make it to one day, but I was able to see like so many bands that I've just never even, that don't get the publicity that they deserve, honestly. Um, and I started getting connected to like, oh, like, these are where these Black bands are performing, and I started finding more queer bands. I started finding more like POC led bands, that were in association with some of the people who threw that show. I was able to find one of my favorite bands called Matha Hardcore. She's like, the lead singer is like this Black woman who sings and then tells like Black femmes to come to the front during her sets. And I've just like never experienced that before. I was like, oh my God, like, you want us to take up space to be up front? I went to an all Black punk band and I go there with this cute pink wig on and I start moshing and my wig gets snatched off, bro. Like, fully snatched off when I was moshing. It was not glued down. It was my fault. But I just remember like not feeling embarrassed at all because there were so many Black people there. And like, one person picked up my wig, another person picked me up because I fell in the mosh pit. And then like one of my friends helped me put it back on, and then like I continued singing, and like the lead singer like gave me the mic to sing along with them because it like just didn't matter. Like, yeah, it's a wig. This ain't my hair. My hair is not 16 inches long with pink and straight. Okay, like, it's okay. I grew up extremely Christian. And oftentimes, even though this is not for everyone who is religious or grew up religious, but for me and my experience, a lot of religion indoctrinated certain things. And obviously, like, our people were enslaved, colonized, and forced a religion on us that really changed the way our people may have been before colonization and before slavery. Um, and for me, as someone who is Black and Indigenous, who is my family's from the Caribbean, it's been really important for me to decolonize the way that I think about the way that I want to thrive in my life. And I learned, like, before colonization, Caribbean people, Taino people specifically, um, were matriarchal and did not have monogamy as a deep part of their practice. Children were raised by the community, and people were able to, like, kind of have relationships with different people. And on top of that, like, even gender wise, like, people were able to switch their genders and move through gender roles more freely than what we have now, where people are highly persecuted for switching their genders or moving around the way they want to be in the world. That's different than other people. Also, similarly, for people who might have African ancestry, like in West Africa, there was a whole other type of way to live before colonization and before slavery happened. And it's incredibly important to acknowledge how many people had multiple partners and how gender was more fluid. For me personally, it was like I had to leave Christianity to become polyamorous. I had to leave Christianity to become queer. I had to leave Christianity to become two spirit and gender fluid. I specifically grew up Seventh day Adventist, which is a little culty. It's a little controlling. It's not a church I would recommend. There are churches that are very accepting of different types of people. The Adventist church is not one of them. Some people might compare us to, like, Mormons, for example. You're not allowed to go dancing. You're not allowed to go to the movies. You're not allowed to watch TV. You're not allowed to, like, wear makeup. You're not allowed to dance. There's so many things you're not allowed to do, or else you're going to go to hell, and you should be afraid of that because hell sounds like a scary fucking place. And that's what white people did to enslave black people. Like, they literally were like, you need to start believing in this God, and this God is going to punish you if you don't do what we tell you that you need to do according to this God. I've been queer all my life. I've had these feelings for all my life. I even remember when I was in church, I asked this older woman, I was just like, how could people, like, not see girls as beautiful, like, on the covers of magazines? Like, wouldn't anyone be attracted to a girl? Because, like, this is my gay thoughts and not me thinking about this as gay thoughts. And then the woman in the church was just like, everybody feels that way about girls. You just have to choose men. You have to choose to be straight. And it's a choice. And I look back at that memory and I'm like, that lady was gay as fuck. I was dating this white man for a while. He was the only white person I've dated. And I remember when we broke up, I, like, brought up race a little bit, and he's just like, race has nothing to do with that. And I was just like, whoa, like, I thought I was with someone who I considered an ally, and, like, this breakup is, like, blowing up my life. Like, we were dating because we were in the same church together. I recognized that he couldn't really hold the race stuff. Not saying, like, all white people can't hold the race stuff, but I was just like, I need to be a little more aware if I have romantic connections with white people. And honestly, I haven't really had romantic connections with white people since then. Um, but I was like, he can't hold this race stuff. I'm like, I feel like my life is exploding because Mike Brown got shot. I'm in this, like, I went to a very white school. I went to University of Vermont, and it was it was like, Vermont is the second whitest state in the U.S. Even though they're very liberal there, it's still hard for white people to truly hold certain things. And I remember going through that breakup and being like, what is the point of being Christian? I can't even, like, talk to some white Christian people about, like, race stuff. Like, what is the fucking point? And I just, like, upheavaled my whole life after that breakup. I studied abroad. I started dating women. I started, like exploring, like, sex and sex work and, like, connecting with people differently. I started like trying different drugs. I started smoking weed. I started drinking, which was not allowed in Christianity, or like in Adventism. You can't even like have wine. It's confusing. Jesus made wine. Um, but like I totally changed my life like all in 1 year. I was just like, fuck this. Like there is no point in behaving for a heaven that may or may not exist. Like I at this time like now practice like more indigenous based spirituality, but I'm agnostic. I'm like, I don't know what's gonna happen, but I know I have to like live my life here. And that's kind of where I'm at right now. Because religiously, like that was really holding me back from being able to express myself, like the fear and like having so much fear of like what could happen. And I'm just like all at once I was just like fuck that. And I just like started dating people, started exploring different parts of my life, exploring pleasure and what that means to me, and also polyamory. I had got my first girlfriend when I was 19. I was dating that white guy when I was like 17 in college. But had my first girlfriend when I was 19. But here's the thing, like dykes, they be far away. Okay, it'd be hard to date. Okay, so I was dating somebody who was very far away, and we were just like, you know what? Let's have an open relationship because we're not next to each other. We're not with each other. We're deprived sexually. Let's like see where this is at. So like in my mind when I was 19, polyamory I thought was just maybe going to be about like hooking up. And like I didn't know until later, and I left my teenage years. I was like, polyamory is so much more than that. Like people want to think that polyamory is just about sex or whatever, but like truly, it's about connecting with people. There can sometimes be a lot of like ownership vibes in monogamy, like you're mine, I'm yours. We can do nothing with nobody else, and sometimes that can be really toxic. And I think monogamy works for a lot of people, especially folks who might need monogamy for certain reasons, might identify as monogamous. It's also like for some people, they're like, it's better for my mental health. And I totally get that. But for me, as I grew up, I was just like, non monogamy has to be a part of my lifestyle for me to feel the liberation that I want to achieve later in life and throughout my life. I think a lot of my activism work has been about like how we get free, how we connect with each other. And it's just like if we can't even like share romance or sexual connection in ways that aren't limiting or to one or two people, like how are we really like getting free? And so that's been some of my philosophy, like my personal philosophy. I know other people who are monogamous will definitely get free in their own beautiful ways, and that's great. But for me, it's literally been a part of my activism. For me, it's not about like being ethically non-monogamous or ethically polyamorous. I think ethics comes up a lot for people who are polyamorous and like what they think is right or wrong. But for me, it's more about consensually non-monogamous and like making sure you're working within the bounds of your consent and everyone's consent, and making sure you're not coercing people into doing shit they don't want to do, because what works for me might not work for you. When I first dated my partner, and mind you, we've been together for like 6 years, we're on 7 now. When I first started dating my partner, I was dating some other person for like 2 years. So I was dating this person for 2 years. We had a beautiful, deep, meaningful relationship. And then I was dating this other, like my current partner for a couple years too. And the thing is, I had to tell this other person that I was dating for 2 years, like, okay, what do you have the capacity to be committed to? Because like I'm interested in seeing how we can grow. And that's something called like an escalator relationship. When you escalate the ways that you want to do things together. And sometimes in polyamory, you have to get off the escalator. I've definitely learned my fair share of that. When I say escalate, I mean um, some people in relationships, they want to become partners. And then they want to date, they want to become partners. And then they want to like get a pet together. Then they want to move in together, or they want to move in together. They want to get a pet together. They want to get married. They want to have kids. They want to grow old together. Like that's kind of like the escalator that we're told to do. But in non-monogamy, I think there's more space to get off that escalator and be like, what do I actually want out of this? Like, where does it have to go? Does it have to like do that thing, that path that we're told over and over again in fairy tales that that's what you should do? Or are we just gonna like fuck and have fun? Or are we gonna like like dual raise kids together and like be in a fucking commune? Are you going to be able to have like more romantic friendships? Like literally one of my friends is like, I'm getting married to my roommate because I love her. We don't sleep together, but like I would definitely raise kids with her. I would definitely like I'm gonna sleep with somebody else, and like have sexual connections with somebody else. But the person I'm committed to is like my roommate. And in polyamory and non-monogamy, there's more space to like tailor what escalation or the escalator means to you. The most important thing is making sure that you know who you are in your heart, because like even if you're really young, sometimes it's hard to get the resources to like really express yourself. But just know like time will tell and you will be able to express yourself.
Oh, all right. Now let's keep it going. I'm very excited to dive into our next guest's story, as I think you will. Another person on our alt black platter. That sounds strange. To present to you is someone who identifies as a nerd, and I really want to get into this, because they are a gamer. For those now, I've been accused of being a gamer, but I'm definitely not a gamer. Although I do play video games.
What games do you play?
I'm whatever games we are playing to raise money for Black Queer Town Hall.
Period.
So Bob and I do video game extravaganzas, and that's the only word I can think of to describe it. And people tune in to watch, and we'll raise money for different organizations, for our organization, frequently. And because of that, people think, oh, okay, well now Peppermint's a gamer. I mean, I guess if a gamer is literally just one who does play video games, fine. But this person is a true gamer. Okay. And so you're going to hear some things that you've never even heard from my pseudo gamer life. Um, and he lives in Australia, which I've visited many times, but has been there for 12 years now. I've only read about our guest on paper, so I'm interested and excited to hear whether or not they have an Australian accent after 12 years. Probably not. I digress. You've heard enough from me. Let's hear from our next guest, Jason.
My name's Jason. I feel like my interest has mostly been in like video games and that sort of thing, but it's always been sort of anything that has extended from that sort of, I guess, kind of like nerdy kind of subculture. So sci-fi, comics, and anything like that. At least at one point, that was sort of like a derogatory term. Like that's an insult to call someone a nerd. But at some point, that sort of became not really an insult, but more like a badge of honor in a way. Which is like, yeah, like this is what I like. That's yeah. So I think I would identify with that. Yeah. I think what really got me sort of like passionate about games, because we always used to play games like when I was younger, like we'd play on the NES, and I have like good memories of playing with my siblings or with my mom occasionally. But it was actually like the Pokemon franchise when that first came out when I was a kid, that really just kind of got me like hooked in a way. But nowadays, yeah, I play pretty much anything like adventure games. Pretty much anything that's story driven is really attractive to me. 'Cause I love a good story, and I think that's what attracts me to other things as well, whether it be like comics or films. Yeah, I think story is pretty important for me. So I actually just finished playing the newest Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom, and yeah, I really enjoyed that. I guess the story in that game is kind of light in a way, because you spend a lot of time exploring and doing other things. But when you are moving the story forward, it's definitely very engaging, and I really enjoyed it. There's a lot of freedom in how you can approach things in this specific game, so that you're given objectives, but you can sort of do anything you want in any order. So, some people might um, go do one thing first and then something else second and then another thing third, but you can do the complete opposite order, or you can choose to only do one of those things, or you can choose to do none of those things, and you can just walk straight to the final boss if you want to. So it just gives you a lot of freedom, which I really enjoy. And they added a new mechanic in this game that allows you to make like weapons and vehicles out of basically anything that you want. So as long as it works, you can make like sort of creations. You could make a car with rocks for wheels, or you could use actual wheels, or whatever. It's there's a lot of freedom in how you approach things and how you can solve puzzles, and that's definitely another one of my favorite aspects. I really enjoy um, the puzzles that are in the game because you just feel a bit less passive, and you feel like you're using your mind a bit more. Eventually, when I started becoming more interested in it, I wanted to talk with other people about them. So I signed up on message boards um, back when that was still a thing. And from that, I, um, met other people who were, into the same things. But then you don't always, once you start having these conversations, you don't always just talk about the thing. You don't always just talk about the video games. And so eventually we get to know each other more and more and more. And so these sort of like acquaintances become friends, become deeper friends. And for me, like that's definitely something that has impacted me because um, I currently live in Australia, but I'm originally from the US. But the reason that I came here in the beginning was because of friends that I had made um, through playing video games. And so those friendships have become something that has completely like opened my world and literally changed my life for me. Um, because now I'm living in a completely different country because of those connections that I made through this hobby. So it really started like going back into like being on message boards when I was younger, and then just becoming friends with a specific group of people. And then over time, as we got older, we were still keeping in touch. We were still talking to each other. We, added each other on Facebook, that sort of thing. And then at one point, we decided to meet in real life because we hadn't actually met yet in person. All our communication had been online at this point. And then, so eventually we did that. We all met in person. And two of the people that I met then happened to be from Australia. And so we just really got on really quickly. Like our bond definitely deepened after meeting in person, and so then I just became interested in visiting them. So I was like, okay, one day, guys, I'm going to come to Australia, and I'll visit you there, and I'll hang out with you. Um, and so then a couple of years later, I did. And then while I was here, I met my partner, and so then I just ended up staying here, and I've been here for about 12 years now, I think. When I was growing up, like I didn't really enjoy reading things that were, set in our everyday kind of world. And there was no like element of, magic or anything like that. And I think that's why things like fantasy or the X-Men or whatever appealed, because even when it's sort of like what superheroes, even though they're still set in our sort of real world, that level of like fantasy still there because people have powers and abilities, um, and I think that's why even something like sci-fi has always appealed, because even though it's sort of trying to be more realistic, it's always or often like set in the far future, so they can introduce technology that is essentially magic because it's so advanced. Um, and I think that sort of probably like a level of escapism is definitely part of what appeals to me. When I was younger, if you wanted to um, dress up as a character for Halloween, or if you wanted to cosplay as them or something like that, and that character wasn't black, then you would get a lot of pushback from other people. Like, oh, you can't be that person. They're not black. You can't be that person. They're not black. And especially back then, there weren't there wasn't as much diversity as there is today. So your options, according to other people, were very limited. It's like if you were Black and you like the X-Men. If you were a woman, you could be Storm, and that was pretty much it. And if you're a guy, you could be Bishop, and that was pretty much it. Um, and now there's a lot more diversity, and I think also people's attitudes have changed in a positive way. Now there's not so much about like, oh, whether your race matches what the character originally looked like. It's more about like, just like how accurate your costume is, that kind of thing. So I think in that way, it's definitely improved. But it also does seem over the last couple of years that in some ways we've taken a few steps back, because it does seem like there's a lot more hostility in online spaces, if anything, about characters being changed, especially if it's related to their race, whether it's the Little Mermaid or anyone else. Like suddenly it's like, oh, they weren't meant to be Black. They shouldn't be, or they shouldn't be this. They shouldn't be Asian. They shouldn't be that. Yeah, and I think those voices have unfortunately become a bit louder. But generally, I would say it's nicer than it was when I was younger. If you look at the cover of most video games, it's like a white guy with a weapon of some sort. Like it's like a gun or a sword or whatever. And I think, yeah, without even realizing it, because that is, 90% of main characters in fantasy or whatever it is, that's just sort of the norm. In the instant that changes, it stands out. And then because it stands out, suddenly there's like, oh, they think that some sort of justification is needed. Like, oh, why are they Black now? Why are they this? Why are they that? And it's like the idea that they could just be that person naturally, I think for whatever reason it's definitely like a struggle. And there always needs to be some sort of reason. I was actually just sort of talking about some friends with this, and one of them had said something about a character being gay in a Disney film. And they had said something like, oh, but there was no reason in the story why they were gay. Like there was no sort of conflict. And it's like, well, there doesn't have to be a conflict. Like they can just be gay. And that can just, but they still see like whiteness and straightness as the default. And so, yeah, anytime that you sort of move away from that even a little bit, I think for whatever reason, there is always that sort of, desire to have a justification for it when you actually don't need one. Like you can just have that, the story be about a person who isn't white, who isn't straight, and that's fine. And it doesn't need to be some sort of, like grand conspiracy or, some sort of a very important story point involving trauma or whatever it is, it's like they can just be that person. Yeah. And I think it really is just boils down to they're just not used to it. And so when it changes, it stands out. It stands out to them. I do think things have changed within the community. I do think people are generally more accepting and like just more reasonable. But just like in other places outside of this, in the political landscape and in general life, I do think there's a bit of a backslide where people are becoming a bit more intolerant. So yeah, I would definitely hope that people continue to just be a bit more, like forward thinking and just a bit more open, not so rigid, and just be open to more stories with people who maybe don't look like them or act exactly like them. I would say it's still a very like white dominated and male dominated space. It's usually like like a few Black people or a few queer people, but not a lot of like overlap between the two. So not a lot of people who are also like people of color and queer. It's kind of like one or the other. Still largely white and straight.
Our next guest is Saint Panic. They are a NYC club door person. Door they, door them.
Or deity. Door
and
deity.
they're deeply
door deity.
Door deity.
Door deity. Good grief.
Door deity. Okay, period. They are a door deity. And they express just how much running the door is an important part of NYC nightlife and can shape your whole experience even before you hit the club. Um, I mean, I've had some pretty crazy experiences at the door, you know, and like inside of
The
clubs,
door is the
just
way that
being
you will be fixing your face when you come in that club. You're either like, because you just had some kind of experience, or you're like, oh, that was fun, like excited, let's go. The door is definitely the
right.
first face that you see when you look at the entrance and see people coming in. You can tell what kind of experience they had just based on their face from the door.
Right. And so that's what we're going to hear next, their experience in nightlife.
My name is Cedric Antonio. I make music and create under Saint Panic or Saint Panic World. I've been in New York as a creative for the last 16 years, and I work in nightlife and production in pretty much all creative ways, as long as it is making something good and standing up for people who look like me. So I was in Baltimore for the first 18 years of my life and studied classical theater, actually, because in Baltimore they have a lot of after-school programs, given like, I guess, post-90s and the crack epidemic and then the white flight of all of that political part of Baltimore. We had a lot of music programs and a lot of theater programs. Especially when you go into school or like any of like the arts programs, especially in New York, there's always the kids on scholarship, and there's the kids whose parents pretty much like they're like, we want you to go here, you can go. Like the talent could be even. It doesn't really balance out that way, but I think when you have a struggle, you kind of find nuanced spaces to actually work. When you're talking about like creative art and especially like the like human condition, you need some sort of conditions that drive you forward, and I think that makes more interesting art. And you can always tell what's kind of being done not from the heart. So no matter what, your audience will always know. I started with doing the door for a party called the Carrie Nation. The Carrie Nation is Will the Magic and Nita Aviance of the House of Aviance. I too am an Aviance. But pretty much it was a roving party, and then we decided to move into a space called Good Room that's in Greenpoint. And so doing the door for that particular party was great because it's gave me a coin to put in my pocket. Our rate has been built off of the 10 years that we've worked for them. But also at my age, I'm 34. And so there's like two generations of elders that I am responsible for their stories, but also like kind of that, like, as you get older, you go out and you don't feel like these people are your people anymore because you don't know anybody or they're like 10 years younger than you. So it kind of forced me to get to know everyone and also maintain that respect for our elders, but also like creating a new ecosystem for the door, which was not there when I first moved here. So the door consists of that. Also, we decided to start making I call it philanthropy through the guest list. So pretty much anyone that's getting a free ticket into the party, we always say bring any cash denomination of any, bring a cash donation of any denomination. And so that goes towards our Carrie Family Fund. So sometimes people are going through hard times, or some of our trans sisters, brothers and sisters need help facilitating any medical things that need to happen. So we like to make use money from what is essentially a free ticket and give that to our family, but also do it really low key. So it's not like you're purging your entire everything just to get support. So it's kind of balancing out those two things while still like it's still an event, it's still a party, but sometimes we can take care of each other more. And so that's part of what I do for Nightlife. From the pandemic, we had this break in everything. And so a lot of kids who have been here for a little bit, who had like seen New York starting to get like ready to step out into nightlife, they their 21st birthday was spent in the pandemic. So naturally, they would be online looking at like the Instagram and all the posts about the different parties, which is why I don't like photographs in the venues, because it's just like you need to come and bring yourself and be ready for it. It's not just this perception of it. It's not euphoria. It's not television. It's like this is based on something that you should probably get into, and mostly just the music. The music can hold you through all that. So they come in seeing like, oh, this is how they are acting, or they feel like I guess I'm part of the older generation now. They think like, oh, being catty or being nasty is the way to get access. But it's like, I'm only that way if I'm protecting my friends or family, and if someone's completely stepped out of line. But for the most part, that's not the general base, because we're all like, look at the world we live in. Like, this is our time to be able to be here. And so even with my door policy, I'm always like, everyone stepped in here, decided to be here. So please respect the space. Please respect the other people around you. Open up your blinders and like zoom out a little bit, because you'll probably leave here with more family if you choose to. So that entitlement kind of goes a long way. Like my sister and I, who also works in nightlife, we were here, but we had like $20 to our name, and so we'd get some like pepperoni cheesy bread, maybe like go make sure we needed everything we needed so we could go out and enjoy the night. We were in school, it was stressful, it was hard, and so we were using it as like an egress out of that, but we were just grateful to dance and be there. When we first started going out, we were 18, and it was still the time where there were still 18 and up parties in New York. So we just wanted to escape from the Upper East Side because we were like, please get us out of here. So one of our friends, shout out to Chrissy Galifianakis. Chrissy was friends with James, I can't remember, James Coppola. And so like James would come and get us from the door and come take us upstairs. But when we would get upstairs, it was Van Damme. No, it was Marquis. So we'd get upstairs and go up to like the top floor, and we would get to the booth, and it would be all of the girls from Pat Fields. So like the Pat Fields girls who were working hair or doing like a selling clothes or like any of the jobs, they all like got their cute looks together and it would go. It's so weird because I think back about those times now that those clubs are closed, but that was the initial beginning of our like actual family, and they treated us like they treated us now. It was like almost like an instant respect. We didn't realize that how radical it was for like a black male presenting and a black female presenting person to be with each other and at the capacity we are in nightlife. So we never really thought of it. We were just kind of like taking care of each other. We were like here. And then as we kind of gotten older and gotten more established in our spaces, you've been seeing like that it's not necessarily a common thing. There's like mixes and crossovers, but like there's not really like we didn't realize how special we had it. And I think it kind of like it facilitates what we're like doing now, because we see like, yeah, we didn't have anyone that looked like us, but like we knew you needed to respect me. I don't care if you don't like me, you're going to respect me, and because I respect myself. And so like I think long story short, those beginning experiences where we didn't think anyone really saw us as like we were seen as like inconsequential or just like kind of like not throwaway, but like just like we were young and we didn't see how much of an impact we were making slowly but surely. And I think that's also a thing. It's like showing up is like half the battle. You show up and you are present, you are like just there in the space, like the universe picks up on that, and the people around you will be gravitated towards you, because a lot of people just go inside these spaces to take. And I think it's just really cool that we've gotten to do this we've been here for, it'll be 16 years in August. So like we've gotten to do this for pretty much most of our growing up here. And it's a very cool thing, because now we get to pass on the conversation. We get to connect some of the younger queens to these like to some of our elders and mentors, and getting to connect them. It's like when you see them, go say hi. Like you two do the same things. I always, whenever I see two friends that are in the same place but they don't know each other, I'm like, y'all should know each other. Brilliant musician, go. Because like a lot of people will just kind of like I was just kind of in my own thing. Like it's a lot to take in, and you don't know where you belong, and you don't know any of these things. But like wherever you want to be, you belong. And if you don't, you can go. The world is not, you don't owe the world nothing. All you need to do is take care of yourself and the people around you, and you'll be good. That's what I've learned. That's the alternative. That's really the alternative. The first thing that happens in nightlife, if you're working in it, is you lose your anonymity. So now that you are on the guest list, now that you are working, your behavior follows you. Honestly, everyone's behavior follows them. So if you want to be part of it, or you're even just being seen enough, like you have to know that you're kind of a representation for the event, you're a representation for the person who put you on the list. And that's not easy. A lot of people come to escape, and that's not necessarily how is the best use of our energy there. Like a lot of us, like you kind of are always working. Like I very rarely get to go out and not be asked to like facilitate something, but I also don't mind it, because this is my family. This is the people who supported me when I had nothing. When I lost my corporate job, and nightlife for the people who were like, yes, you can do this, you can bar back. I went from bar back into bartending, but like it was more consistency. So like I think a lot of it, people just see it as recreation, and they don't necessarily see what it takes to be responsible for something that everyone thinks is recreation. There's no mental health resources. There's no insurance policies for us. If you get sick or hospital sick, there's no guarantee you're coming back to your job. So whenever we're all together, it's like, just know that these are, you can help us facilitate this, but also like you're giving part of yourself to be able to keep this space alive. When I started in nightlife and then I was kind of pivoting into working in fashion, like I remember I had gotten a gig working with Wilhelmina Modeling Agency. And so it was connected to one of my friends that I knew from going out, but they knew my work and they were like, honestly, like, just let me know whatever you need. But when you like get into nightlife, you realize that so much of the ecosystem of work in New York is a center in nightlife. Like a lot of the people who are the photographers you're going to meet or the designers, they get their inspiration. And so there's like a back and forth with that. But a lot of times, if you were regulated to the bar or regulated to just a specific task in the club, a lot of times you don't have the energy or the time or space to be able to create because you're putting so much of your energy into that side. So, like, a lot of times it's really hard to have nightlife be 100% of your schedule without some like scheduled breaks for just relaxing and resting, but also for creating. And so there's a lot of times where, I mean, most of the people who I know who are holding down the clubs, who are managing different festivals, they're some of the best artists that in their work that I've seen in New York to this date, but they don't get as many opportunities, or when they do, they still have to juggle their full-time responsibilities with that opportunity. To me, I think I've always been alternatively Black without really knowing it. I always joke and say that I'm a geriatric Gen Z because all the stuff that they seem to love and enjoy, like I got made fun of for liking in middle school. So it's always this weird thing where I'm like, we have something in common, but I just don't like the way you act. So I'm gonna like keep some distance and be like, okay, girl, keep that up. But yeah, I feel like Black is the alternative in general because so much of Blackness is combined into all creative work, all popular culture, and clearly we're not a monolith. And most of us who don't have like any other, I guess, any other mixing in our family, like I always say, I'm exiled on this land. Like I'm Black from Baltimore. I just happen to have been exposed to a lot of different music based in my family and grew up in the church. So like there's a lot of different things that are pushing and pulling. And I think even for me, my alternative is that like a lot of people think working in nightlife or the things that we do creatively, or even just like they say your lifestyle, they think that like that is that I'm separate away from my faith. But my faith has just expanded in me knowing that like all of my gifts and all of my greatness have come from being Black and being queer. And so like no church, no pastor, no anything can take that away from me. And especially sometimes when you're in the club, that's like the most like spiritual spaces I've ever been able to encounter as of late, just because like there's something that happens when you've made something in your bedroom, some music, and then you go out to an event and you hear it on the loudspeaker and you see people moving. It's kind of like you feel that wave. So I feel like I had to find all that light within the darkness of nightlife and make sure that I'm pushing that through. Music is such a driving force in Black culture, and working in the techno scene, especially, like so much of it had been removed from the Black experience. I've always been in these scenes in which like I didn't see anyone reflected of me or even my energy or even having like a Black woman and Black women and different women in my circle. Like that was kind of not heard of within the nightlife scene. It was very much like very male oriented, or like the women were accessories. And I think I just kind of combined my families together because none of my friends are the same. And so just kind of like, and just living, like being able to jump around. Even in middle school, I would sit at every different table in the cafeteria. So like having my circle reflect that and having it be some punks, some like fashion queens, some drag queens, some like actual just like cis women and trans women, like the whole combination of it is all part of what makes me excited about like stepping up and protecting people at the door, creating music and creating space. So like instead of it being this alternative where you can just be like a bitchy gay or like just some whatever you think it is to like make it so like you're higher than other people, the alternative is just kind of like, no, if I got to do this, you can do this too, and like let's figure out what that is for you. I don't want you to replicate me because I'm already taken. I'm not replicating my like mentors because they're already taken. So I was working for this new club. It's a larger venue. They've been open probably for the last like 4 years in different ways. And so this person who had worked at other venues in Brooklyn, they had asked me and one other person to do the door. And so when we're gonna have a little interview with them, and it just you could just feel that they just were not. I don't know. I just felt like even after the first interview, I was like, that person doesn't like me. I'm not getting that job. So I went back, sat in the interview, and they asked me the question like, if let's say if your you find out a security guard has been taking bribes to get people to come into the club or to cut the line for the club, what would you do? How would you discipline that? And I literally said, well, given the fact that most of your security is black and that's not my job description, that has nothing to do with what you asked me to do for this job. And if that's what you want, you can have this. And they recoiled, but like it was, you could tell what they were trying to get at was that how do we keep this exclusivity but like utilize you to do it? And honestly, my door policy is the exact opposite. Like I have trust issues for a lot of different people, so I'm gonna let you show me exactly what you like. Let your actions speak, and from there, then we can kind of balance it out. But like it's always been kind of because I was in spaces in which like I had a good rapport with the people who were working. Um, I knew that like me being there was like reflection, and so I would have more black customers. I would have more queer people. I would have more like trans women who would feel comfortable in these spaces because I'm there, and that's kind of. I think after 10 years, I no longer have to deal with those things. But in the beginning, especially being a younger door person, like it was very much like you could see the old wave trying to like connect me to like their old policies. And you've seen what happened in Chelsea and all the different HK clubs with like the different druggings and things. And it's like if you don't have a consistent, like clear rapport with your people, then yeah, you're gonna have these things come into your space and you don't know. Like it's easy to spot someone who's not supposed to be there, but it doesn't mean that's just because of what they look like. It's because of how they're moving through the space. You can feel that energy everywhere. But yeah, it's a common practice for people to try to put us in front of their comfort and or in front of their discomfort, and then try to make it our job to man people like us. And I'm like, most of the times you have to like worry about people who don't look like us. We step in being thankful, being grateful, and knowing that like you already have these assumptions of me. I'm not going to go out of my way to make you to like disprove those assumptions. Sometimes I might lean into it just to like really kind of like lay it on because that's just kind of the world we live in, which I wish it was not that way, but we have to be cognizant of that to even move about safely. I mean, the Carrie Nation has been our like direct family for a very long time and have just supported us, whether or not we were doing their door. They were like, we want you all to just move forward and go into your like creative practice. So during the last year, we had our 10-year anniversary, which ended up being 3 days of us being at Good Room. But we had from Johnny Dynell to just like pretty much we had old school, new school, right now school, like everyone was there. And it was exhausting. It was very hard. But by day 3, we were just like, okay, we got through it. We're just going to make it happen. And then I just remember there was this moment where like I finally got to sit down and I just started crying because like I was just so excited and happy, but like we had made this thing happen. And it kind of was the first time in those 10 years that I actually saw myself like 10 years ago. And I was like, the amount of work, the amount of creative things I've gotten to do with this family has been absolutely like worth it. Like anytime I get to hear something I made or something like my friends made and we get to hear it out on the system and just watch that really change. I mean, it changes how you feel about it. You'll always have notes, but I think that's the beauty of having that creative space. It amplifies your ideas in a way. It's not necessarily about taking the energy from the room. It's about adding to it. I remember there was this one time at the party merge I was working, and usually I stop everyone and talk to them individually to go in, because I like to kind of, if I've established that, like, if you can't look me in the eye, speak to me directly, and like tell me why you need to be here, or at least like have a conversation with me. If you can't respect me here, then you're going to get past me and disrespect every single person going from the cashier to the bar. So my door policy is like, stop and have a moment with me. Come and talk to me. Like, I'm pretty open. And like at the door at this point, I've yelled enough in my life that I don't have to scream anymore. But like, I remember this one time this girl was coming in and she just looked like she was going through it, like really just going through it. And her friends kind of were like ahead of her, and I stopped her and I was like, "Are you okay?" And she literally was like, "Yeah, yeah, I'm fine." I literally just talked to her. I was like, "Listen, whatever you're looking for any event, you're bringing to it. But also, it's more important your energy that you bring in and less your money. So take a second and like just leave that out of your head. Go and dance it out. Whenever it comes back in your head, just go to the dance floor. But like, make sure you do that for yourself, because if you bring that energy inside, it's only going to fester worse and worse. Like, you're going to be around people, but everyone chose to be here. And like, I said that to her just kind of like off the cuff, because that's just like, I was like, you need to adjust that energy before you go inside. Sometimes if they're rude, I make them go around the block or come back next month. But like, she went inside, and then maybe like three people down, the person came up to me and just stopped me, and they were like, "Oh my god, like this! I've never heard any door person ever just kind of stop and read a situation like that." And they pretty much just like read me down to like seeing the work that I was doing, which like sometimes you don't feel like people see it. They just see like you an obstacle. And then so like we kind of hugged it out and they went inside, and then maybe 6 hours later the girl comes back with like the brightest smile and gives me the biggest hug, and she was just like, "Thank you so much." Like, I like, and she was like, "I'm not even gonna go through it because honestly like it doesn't matter anymore." And like, even just having that switch, because I know I needed that switch sometimes when I was stepping out and being like in my body and in my head, and like you just know, you have all these projections of yourself going into it, because it used to make me nervous going out. It would be like stage fright, like getting in line and getting that ready. But I knew there was something inside that I needed to like harness for myself, and just seeing other people kind of take that leap of faith and not just kind of move through with a nasty attitude, but like also respond to the work that we're doing, and like respond to it in a way that's about something that like we're really focusing on. I think that was probably one of the most amazing experiences that happened to me last year, with like just doing the door with like a new wave of kids who I wouldn't even really have known otherwise. But it has become like a little family. And so you see them outside of the club, and like, I only look for people who light up when I see them in the space, and I light up when they see me. So like, it's kind of like that energy exchange is what seals the deal for me, honestly.
Okay, now our next fabulous guest is it's a really special moment, I think, because I have only I don't even know if we've ever actually met in person, believe it or not, now that I think about it. But we are close by proxy, because I am very good friends with his identical twin sister. And so I'm super excited to introduce Lamar. Now, for those of you that have only been flipping through your channels, probably have seen him on the show that I've been binging. It's called Claim to Fame, where people go through and try to guess the famous celebrity of each of the contestants. And he had a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful moment where he was speaking about his identical twin sister, Laverne Cox. But you also may not have known that when he was appearing on Orange is the New Black, standing in for Laverne, that was actually not Laverne. It was actually our guest, Lamar, who is a wonderful human being, and I would say an activist, and is just a brilliant person for sure. Dropped out of Yale to pursue music, and we'll be serving up some music very, very soon, but identifies within the Goth scene, and identifies as Goth, and participates very healthily in the Goth. Is healthily a word? Healthfully, whatever, in a healthy way in the Goth scene. And yeah, I can't wait for you to hear his story. Here's M. Lamar.
My name is M. Lamar. I'm a composer, performer, writer. I make these sort of long form pieces that sort of stem from some aspect usually of the Black American experience, so music theater pieces or monodramas usually, that are very operatic, that are very Gothic. Negro-gothic, in fact, a term that I created around 2009, 10, negro-gothic. And then I also have a sort of form that I created called the Doom Spiritual, which is sort of an iteration of the Negro spiritual or the African American spiritual, if that's more politically correct for you. I've been making music since like the 90s. Like I dropped out of Yale School of Art in like 1996 because I wanted to sort of like focus on music. And one of the things I started like getting really intense with like operatic training, music theory, and piano, but I also started a band. And so there was this sort of operatic thing going on with the band, but also this very gothic sort of rock thing. And so for years, people always, whenever you tell people you make music, they're like, what kind of music do you make? And so Negro Gothic seemed to be all one word. Negro Gothic seemed to be the best description of it, meaning that I was interested in this place where romance and horror meet, much like the Gothic novel. We understand that the Gothic novel is about these horrific kinds of maybe sometimes supernatural things, these horrific things, mixing with this very romantic thing. And I thought that was because the themes in my work seem to be very focused on this American kind of horror show that is white supremacy, but in this very kind of aestheticized way. Like I was very much aestheticizing this kind of horror in a kind of gothic genre. And so Negro Gothic really means blending these kinds of things together. And then I was also, of course, a goth kid growing up. And so it made a lot of sense that I would kind of try to make sense of my life as a Black person, a Black American person, through the lens of a kind of gothic aesthetic. I was this kid who didn't have any friends. Like I didn't have any. I mean, maybe it was my queerness that alienated me. Maybe it was just that I was sort of weird and strange and different. I mean, probably a combination of those things. But at my fine arts high school, there were all these like kids with mohawks and dressed in all black and very sort of the punk and goth and metal thing, all was kind of sort of blurring together, all the sort of kids in black trench coats kind of thing. And those kids were like fascinating to me. And there were also like people who didn't seem to like think that I was strange, like it was a group of people that sort of just like accepted my strangeness and my weirdness. And so I kind of gravitated towards those people, and then I would like be hanging out with them, and we'd go to goth clubs. I remember because this was one time, so like I went to high school in Birmingham, Alabama, but then I was in Mobile. I'm from Mobile, Alabama, and it's about 2 hours away from New Orleans. And so I told my mother I was like spending the night at this guy Scott's house that she knew, but then we like drove to New Orleans. And I remember the first goth club I went to was this place called the Blue Crystal. And everyone was doing this sort of like goth dancing. This would have been, God, like I'm so old now. This would have been maybe the late 80s. Yeah, it would have been 88, 89. I've never told this story before. I don't think in terms of dates, but God, when you say that like that, it's like, that's so long ago. That's like me being really old. I never think about that. But anyway, so maybe 88, 89, something like that. So we drive to New Orleans and we get into this club. I don't know how we got in because, we're like 16. I'm 16. We're all 16 maybe at the time. And it's this club called the Blue Crystal. Everyone's like sort of doing this goth dancing with like this very, and I just started doing it with them. I was very like, like into it. That kind of, it took this blend of a kind of like modern dancing with like this sort of a bat dance thing that happens with like a lot of like, anyway, I was just very like, into it. It was very much a thing. And then I remember this one time in college. So in college, I went to the San Francisco Art Institute, and there was this gorgeous goth boy named Scott there, I never had sex with Scott, but I had the biggest crush on Scott. And so he had like purple hair. It would change colors. Sometimes it'd be blonde, sometimes it'd be purple, with like just very Victorian, like traditional in the vernacular. He's a traditional goth, like because there's all kinds of subcultures of subcategories of goth. He's very much in the traditional, the Victorian kind of sleeves and all that kind of thing. It's anyway. So I went to a goth club with him. I think his girlfriend was there too, but everyone's kind of bisexual. Yeah, also the great thing about goth, everyone's bisexual. So anyway, so I think his girlfriend's there. Anyway, so I sort of started dancing in my like the way that I dance, and I don't know if I was like identifying hardcore as goth. I've always been goth, but I don't know if I was like identifying like that way. But I wore these long skirts, these long black skirts, and all black all the time and stuff. And I started dancing, and I was doing my like sort of the dance, the goth do, and then my sister did ballet forever, so there was always a little bit of ballet in there, but not really. I'm not like a that kind of dancer, but the arms that people do in ballet. Anyway, so I started doing that thing, and the Scott was like, oh my God, like Lamar's so goth, he's so goth. Anyway, so that's the funny thing, and it's like a home thing. Like I think people are always like curious about why I don't like identify as like non-binary or genderqueer or any of those kinds of things. And I'm like, and I think that why I don't identify as any of those things is because like for the people who are genderqueer or non-binary or whatever that stuff is, when they hear those terms, there's like this revelation for them. It's like this is home. They see themselves as like this, profound thing. For me, it was Goth, like realizing that I was Goth, and that was like my revelatory moment where I was like, this is I sort of feel very comfortable here. These are my people. I think I jokingly, but I think it was true. I think at one point I said jokingly that it's an aestheticization of chronic depression. I mean, I just think that one aestheticizes a certain kind of darkness, not in a way that's like, necessarily demonic or evil or anything. It's just like there's a certain darkness that's just inherent in the world. I mean, it's particularly if we're talking about, white supremacy. There's just a darkness that just is, and there's nothing. I mean, we can protest, we can, sort of do things to try to change them, but there's a certain kind of fact of that. I think there's a certain kind of thing about, I mean, the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, kind of thing that we go with. And so then how do you sort of like deal with that? So it's also a strategy. I mean, I think Goth is also like a strategy to sort of deal with and cope with the world as it is. I mean, I also jokingly always call myself a devil worshipping free black man in the blues tradition, which, freaks a lot of like, conventional conservative black people out, for the obvious, church reasons or whatever. I'm not like a devil worshiper or anything, but I evoke that because the blues represents in the American landscape a moment of emancipation. I mean, at post-slavery, it was this moment when black people could embrace all kinds of things they couldn't embrace during slavery, like the devil, for example. I mean, there was this forced Christianity, and all this blues music emerged that was like, trying to grapple with a certain kind of Dionysian like way of being and way of living. So I think that has been a fact of African American life, of Black life in the U.S. Like this thing of aestheticizing catastrophe. The blues is a catastrophe told lyrically. Rob Ellison tells us, and Cornel West constantly reminds us of this thing of catastrophe told lyrically. And so the blues is certainly that, jazz is that, the spiritual, the Negro spiritual is that. And so I mean, I think that taking this kind of making it the goth aspects of it more explicit. I mean, I think that if you look at a novel like Beloved by Toni Morrison, it's absolutely a gothic novel. Absolutely, there's so many parts of African American culture that have been gothic, and so I'm trying to make all of that kind of tradition more explicit and more pointed. All these kinds of ghost stories and all these kinds of these horrors. Well, it's interesting. I mean, the new piece I'm working on is called "Machines and Other Intergalactic Technologies of the Spirit." Another title that sort of an alternative title is "Bionic Dicks and Hyperreal Niggas: A Post-Human and Ancient Sci-Fi Aching." So this piece is dealing a lot with Egyptian mythologies. Osiris is a big figure in this piece. Isis is a big figure in this piece. I mean, so much of like what I'm trying to deal with. So my collaborator, I had this person that writes librettos with me, Tucker Culbertson. I mean, writing a libretto for a new piece involves a lot of research, a lot of reading, a lot of kind of to put together what the text will be. And so we're both reading a lot of coffin text from ancient Egyptian tombs. And so, I mean, the texts were different when we were talking about pharaohs. There were all these like texts and hieroglyphics that would be in the tombs for pharaohs, but then common people would then start having these kinds of very elaborate kinds of stories and poems and kinds of chants that would be a part of their tomb, where they'd be buried. And this was to sort of assist them in their journey from this life to the afterworld. And so, yeah, I think that it is also calling back to an earlier piece of mine called Funeral Doom Spiritual, which there's a lot of stuff about this coffin carrying across centuries in that piece. And so I completely agree with you that like what's happening as I delve more into particularly this Egyptian thing is that there are all these echoes in my own work, and then also just I think in African American spiritual practice, aesthetic practices in general that are like coming up. This is a thing of going to a performance to be entertained, or sort of like I don't know. There's always a kind of circus acty kind of thing in show business, and again, I don't want to disparage that at all. That's perfectly legitimate and fine. I would like to think that something else is happening in the course of the things that I do. I'd like for other things that are not about spectacle or, entertainment even necessarily. I mean, I never thought of myself as an entertainer as much as like sort of, staging various kinds of experiences. So I hope so. but again, I don't know how well I can dictate that. But I mean, there's certain things you can dictate as a performer. I mean, there's a certain kind of mood, a certain setting. I mean, I guess it's your job. I mean, to kind of create a certain kind of environment, setting. I just did a performance that some of my least favorite performances to do with this gallery that I've done a lot of work in, Participant Inc. Had their 20-year anniversary um, sort of event. It was also a benefit at this place called SOBs, like last Monday, maybe June 26th here in New York. Anyway, and so I was on a bill with like amazing people like um, serving with teeth. Like I think they were surprised. They were on the bill. Anyway, amazing people performing. And so I had like I don't know like 15 minutes or something to do a thing. And so I kind of in that context was like, okay, I have this time, and I think I have to change the mood. The mood is maybe celebratory, maybe it's people are talking or they're doing a thing, and it's my job to kind of you know suggest that we're going to have a different kind of experience now. I started going to punk sort of DIY shows when I was like a teenager, and one of the things that drew me to like, and they weren't just goth shows, they were like punk or metal shows or noise shows. Or one of the reasons why I think I gravitated towards that scene is that it was just very open. Like I found myself hanging out with a bunch of hippie type people. I lived in San Francisco for years, so obviously hang out with hippies in San Francisco. But I mean, I think that I was always just going where the water was, comfy and cozy, the path of least resistance. And so there just tended to be with like, people from like alternative scenes, like punk goth, metal, hippies, whatever. So I mean, so yeah, no, I was in those scenes because I felt accepted because I was always wearing something ridiculous, I just always had something ridiculous on, and I just, I remember in 2002 or three, when in San Francisco, where everyone I knew was like protesting the war and or doing various kinds of demonstrations, or anti-gentrification demonstrations, etc. And there were like not many black people, in the scene I was in doing that. But like the four other black people who were involved in these protests, black men who were like sort of like at least perceived as black men. I'm not sure what people's gender identities were, but they all ended up getting arrested. But I didn't. Like, I've never been arrested, knock on wood. And I've been involved in lots of protests in my day. And I think it's because I probably was like, had something ridiculous, some kind of crazy goth hair and makeup, and I don't know. The police. I mean, I think when you're like illegible, really, I think it's like you're less of a target. I think when it's easy to read you as a black man. We know that black men are unfairly targeted by the police. I mean, we understand that now at this point. I think that one of the things that probably saved me from that targeting was just not being easily coded as a black man. In a conventional sense. I identify as a man. Those my pronouns are he, him, but I was never within some binary system of that. And so, I mean, I think that my blackness is, it's, I mean, being black is so complicated. And I guess this is like the point of this one is like what alternatively black was this, the topic. And I mean, I think that it's been this wonderful privilege in a way to be kind of illegible to like even other black people. But I mean, I think that early on it involved like maybe a lot of harassment from other black people, like just on the street. But that's changed. I think that like sort of post Lil Uzi Vert, like in the Young Thug and Playboy Cardi and Bloody Osiris, all these like rappers who were very kind of emo and kind of goth. I mean, just like black people's relationship to me walking down the street has just changed in the last like 5 to 7 years. It's just really different. I'm just as goth as I've always been. But like, there's just I'm getting love. I'm getting kind of love, like a lot of young men, black men. Like it used to be that like young black men on the street were like faggot. Like, what is that? What are you doing? Like, why are you wearing all those like spikes and like all that leather, all that leather in the summer? Like, what's going on with you? And now it's like I was talking about this black dude. He was like, dude, no, he said, bro, you look epic. And I was like, thank you. Yeah, thanks a lot. I mean, so it's like it's a whole other. I mean, it's just kind of. I mean, Billy Porter says this all the time. I'm so glad I've lived long enough that the world could catch up to me or whatever. And I think it's a thing of like having lived long enough that I can see how black people's relationship to me on the street has changed in my lifetime, and it's great. Definitely internalized white supremacy that black people will police other Black people's behavior. It's about respectability politics as well. It's also about the kind of anxiety that Black people have in themselves about their own sort of ability to get through the day or their life or society or something, that they're having to put that on another Black person. They've internalized white supremacy to such a degree and extent that they're like, this is like, wait, this is going to fuck everything up. You know, I think it creates a lot of anxiety when a not free Black person sees a really free Black person, a person who just doesn't give a fuck, who's just like, you know, going about their life in a very free way. I think that it caused a lot of anxiety for years with a lot of Black people. It's just great that that's shifted, though. I mean, just at the street level for me. I'm just happy that I've lived long enough for that to have changed. You know, because I've always, even when Black people were, you know, denouncing me on the street pretty regularly, I was always the guy, I love all Black people unconditionally, not because they love me in return, but because Black people are so worthy of love. And that's always been my position. So it's just great to get, you know, some love back. Screaming Jay Hawkins is the founder of the modern goth rock movement. I mean, he is absolutely the first goth rocker, in the same way that Sun Ra is the first glam rocker, right? Sun Ra is the first glam rock figure, you know, before Bowie, before, you know, Mark Bolan, before any of those people. But you know, Screaming Jay Hawkins is huge for me. Screaming Jay. I've been obsessed with Screaming Jay, you know, since I was a kid, actually. I mean, the coffins. He had a coffin way before I had a coffin. It was like, you know, emerged from way before Alice Cooper did, way before. I mean, and all the goth rockers, like the Peter Murphys of the world, the Roz Williamses of the world, they all like had reverence for Screaming Jay. And Diamanda Gallas, one of my favorite singers, who's very interested in, like, you know, she's a Greek American, but she's very interested in like blues and Black music and jazz, free jazz. Cites Screaming Jay Hawkins is very, 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 very important. She's also very goth. No, Screaming Jay is absolutely a major, major, major figure for me. And I mean, but for the goth movement in general. I mean, I think white goths, Black goths, we all have to, you know, hail Screaming Jay. And also very queer. Screaming Jay is very queer. I don't know if people sucking dick, but like absolutely queer. So I think that like the face of goth is just like shifted. I mean, I also think about all the kids who were like very much identify with like a goth emo like aesthetic. It's just not the same. I mean, like I think that used to be the case, that it was a very like people thought it was a very white thing, but I just don't think that's true anymore. The first negro-gothic song I could think of writing was probably a song called Plantation Mistress that I wrote in maybe 96, 97. It's like Plantation Mistress, I love your hair, ghostly white skin, and I'll work downstairs, something like that. I mean, so that was like, you know, very much, I think, a negro-gothic song, even before I started calling the genre of music, to this art making that I've engaged in, negro-gothic. And so, I mean, I just think the world has become more open to that. I mean, like this thing happened a few years ago where there's a book called Darkly that came out, and there's Leela Taylor is the woman who wrote it. I met her. She came to one of my exhibitions, and she was like, "Oh my God, when I discovered you, I was like, oh, I was writing this like book about like Black Americans and goth and this whole thing, and then I saw you in the New York Times. I mean, there was a New York Times article in like 2017 about me. I was on the cover of the art section or whatever, and so that was, she's like, it was a revelation, because she also was this Black woman who had like been in the goth scene and the BDSM scene. They overlap often, those scenes, and so saw me as a revelation. And then there was another book about queer. What is that book called? About queerness, goth and queerness. This woman spent a lot of time on my work in that book. So I mean, the world has become more interested in I guess my particular investigations or curiosities or whatever. And so yeah, I mean, it's great. I mean, I'm the happiest I've ever been in my life. Like I love where my work is. I love where my like, you know, my mental health is. I mean, as someone who's been chronically depressed all my life, I'm really happy now. I'm actually not depressed at all. I'm like in this great like place in terms of my mental health, and yeah, and there's an appreciation for my particular investigations that I'm feeling it's happening now, and it's great. Like I love it. I'm not a rapper, but the second verse of this song, plantation neo-colonist wanting to freak with the freakiest, seeking and searching for the scariest, thugged out nigga pussy terrorist. She said, rape me, rob me, rape me. She said, rape me, rob me, rape me. Nigga dick, don't you want that nigga dick, nigga sperm, shooting for my sugar firm. She said, "Rape me, rob me." Anyway, I mean, there's another song called "Sharecropping." With "Welcome to our plantation, we the niggas, sex in the nation, white folk be given ovation like head. I guess we quite the sensation. Sharecropping, we're sharecropping anyway. Feast the harvest, you know, it be growing. It's a dick thing, you know, it be showing. Anyway, it goes on. So, but those are like just fun things. I mean, they're, God. Um, there's this song called "Carrying the Coffin" song. I've walked this earth for centuries, millennia, carrying your coffin on my back. My grieving will never tire. My grieving will never end till you come back to me for centuries. I've carried your coffin on my back. My grieving will never end. You know, stuff that's less fun. There was a song called "Let Darkness Descend" that's kind of like back in the day. I'm afraid of the sun. I'm afraid of the sun. Blistering light, burning bright, darkening already darkened skin. I'm afraid of the sun. And fields of cotton, and fields of cotton, bathed in southern memory. The sun never shed a light. Its labor never free. Let darkness descend. I'm afraid of the light. I'm afraid of the sun. I'm sorry, casting shadows in its light and darkness. We're all equally lost. I'm afraid of the sun. And feels of cotton bathed in southern memory. I don't believe the cost. I don't believe the dream. Let darkness descend. In order to really truly be free, I think as a black person, one has to kind of have a relationship to this history. You know, I mean, I think we all have to come up with our own relationship to this. You know, unending white supremacy. I think we all have to come up with our own relationship to unending patriarchy, unending homophobia. I mean, I think that we all have to negotiate. What it means to live a life that, like, are we going to be burdened by these things? Or for me, it's about aestheticizing it. It's about sort of like singing about it and singing through it. I want desperately a connection with the ancestors through this work, through, and I haven't done I don't know what specific tribe I'm from, but you know, I haven't done that particular, like those tests. But I want this connection to this long history. I mean, I feel, I mean, it's a spiritual thing. I mean, it's beyond, it's somewhat intellectual. I mean, I think it's very intellectual, but it's deeply spiritual, just needing to kind of connect with like this grand history. I mean, I think that one of the wonderful things about, and very intimidating things about making music as a black person is it's such a grand history. I mean, there's so many, I mean, the freest people we've always seen, Cornel West always talks about this, are the musicians in Black life. I mean, to be a part of that legacy, that lineage is humbling, but also just awe-inspiring and wonderful. And I just think our history is so glorious in terms of like what we've been able to do with all of this white supremacy, all of this like this hatred, like thrust upon us. We've been able to make such extraordinary kinds of music, kinds of culture, literature. I mean, I just want to be some small part of that glorious history, you know? I mean, I think I always think of Erykah Badu. She's always, when I saw her, like, I don't know, first time I saw her in 97, 98, whatever, when she like came on the scene, it was just clear. She was like deeply spiritual, deeply intellectual, and free as fuck, you know, just free. And she's been on, like, getting freer, as you know, freer, freer, freer. And I think she models for many of us that kind of thing. But then when you, like, I mean, they're all kind of like Funky Dineva and that whole like thought soul thing. I mean, there's a lot of kind of policing going on in that kind of. I mean, it's very entertaining. I watch it, you know, like Funky Dineva is like in sort of the tradition of like of a kind of orator, like a reader, I guess. You know, Henry Louis Gates has that very famous Signifying Monkey book from 1989, like the sort of the dozens, that whole kind of like the reading. It's a very long black tradition of that, and so Funky is in that tradition in a genius way. I mean, he's a virtuoso in terms of like the ways in which, you know, he uses language. But there is like a kind of a retrograde. A lot of the kind of thing they're trading on is really retrograde politically, and not like taking us to different places. I also think that reality TV and I think a lot of that stuff is kind of. I mean, from what I've seen, I've actually never watched like the Real Housewives of anything or Basketball Wives, but I mean, the reports I see from it, it's all very retrograde stuff in terms of like heterosexuality and monogamy, and even if you just look at the way that black people have responded to like Will and Jada and their kind of like unconventional marriage. I mean, people were like holding them up as like these pillars of whatever when we didn't know all their business, but now that we know their business, it's like weird to people and they have weird kids. And I'm just like, I mean, they're just living their life. I mean, like, I think their kids seem well adjusted. Like, they seem like again, free. Both kids seem really free and open. Um, I mean, I think that they seemingly did a great job, but it doesn't like fit a kind of Barack Obama, Michelle Obama narrative. I mean, I think people want kind of a Barack and Michelle fantasy that's very conservative and very retrograde and very like not really taking us anywhere. Like, so I think, unfortunately, I think we're really far from a kind of total freedom. But there've always been, on the positive side, extremely free Black people from like slavery times on. Like they've always been very free in the midst of every kind of catastrophe you can imagine. So I'm very encouraged. I feel very positive about the whole thing, and just walking down the streets in New York and Brooklyn, in various neighborhoods in Brooklyn, getting all this love from like Black men on the street. That's real different. So I want to celebrate that, and I think the shifts in hip hop, with all like the rappers wearing like dresses and carrying like, Gucci bags and Chanel bags, so a bit of a lot of space, and that's great. It's really fantastic. And we owe a lot of that to Kanye too, for better or worse. um, but we do, I mean, we do. Like, we really, I mean, from the backpacks, I mean, that 808s and Heartbreak or whatever, that album, like, is the album that informed, like, Lil Uzi and like, Juice WRLD and all these, like, rappers who then shifted, like, so many things for the culture now. So, it's a mixed bag, isn't it? So many of our, of the very important, Rick James is a mixed bag, we love him, but, R. Kelly is a mixed bag. I mean, genius musically, but then clearly he's got a lot of issues. Life is endlessly complicated, and so I always want to embrace the complexity of it. I don't want to ever be like black and white about things. And I also think that that's also, if we can get to a place that's not like an either or thing, but like an yes and, like, what is the third thing? What is that and thing? It's like these things are great, and then there's this thing that's great. I mean, there's not like you don't have to be so binary.
Woo. What are your last thoughts, Pep, on being alternatively Black?
I mean, I think it's something that's just, I think blackness is a notion. It should be, I think, it certainly is a notion that is shifting, that shifts, that's shifting, that's ever shifting. It's not like it's just going from one thing to the other. It's that it is constantly in flux, And going back to what we talked about earlier with speaking, proper English, grammatically and everything, standard American English, we should say. I don't know when it uses proper English, because English is also one of those living, breathing things that changes. Like LOL meant nothing 15 years ago.
Right.
But I will say that, going back to that point about people speaking standard American English, and being ridiculed for that if you're Black, but not if you're white. It just goes to show that, like, when we go back through our lineage and history, I think that's something that, like, my relatives for sure were doing in the 60s during the civil rights era and struggle. Like, no one was ridiculing them for speaking standard American English, right? And I don't know, but I would like to think that of our ancestors who were literally banned and held back and probably punished for even picking up a book, I would like to think that they'd be happy and proud that some of their descendants have managed to master the education, master, no pun intended, the education, and grasp onto the education that was being withheld from us for centuries. And so the written education. And so, there's a whole nother conversation about, this is colonialism working its way into the minds of the descendants in the diaspora. But
period.
But nevertheless, these are the tools that we use in this country. Language and education are some of the tools that we use in this country, and so to have a grasp of that is seeming something that seems non-Black or anti-Black or antithetical to Blackness today, where it was something that our relatives, living relatives, were being beaten and jailed for 45 years ago. and so they fought for that, and so we're going to hold it very proudly. And the opportunities and the rights to choose the different things that we want in the United States and as a human being is something that everybody should be able to take advantage of, not just people who aren't Black. And so, alternatively Black, it means everything and it means nothing.
Right. I mean, Miss Pep, I agree with you to the moon and back. I think that like here in the United States, I think what I've learned from this episode is being Black is the alternative.
Yeah.
Like in this United States, we Black people are the like Black is alt. We have provided so much to pop culture, to media, and people don't even know. And then yet here we are, towards one another, saying you're not Black enough. You've talked funny. You do this, you do that. And it's like, just because I talk a certain way does not mean I will not spin your block. I'm just kidding. I don't believe in violence, but
I do.
just
so
think...
try me, bitch. Just kidding.
I just think that like we don't need, like, we can catch more flies by lifting one another up,
course.
And sticking with one another.
Maybe it is just a continuation. I mean, I know that there's research into this. This is probably a continuation of the house versus the field enslaved person mentality,
Right.
which goes into colorism and then other isms. And here we have it, that we are like finding ways to cut down and sort of criticize the authenticity of Black folks so that we can try to point to something that's holding us back, something that's poisonous to the community. Oh, well, you're not really Black. And like pointing that out and calling that out, as opposed to not us.
Say it. Go. Right.
The man. I'll say the man. I was gonna say Whitey, but I won't say Whitey.
Go ahead.
No. Because there are the systems that Whitey has put in place. The systems that Whitey has put in place. The systems of oppression that the colonizers and then the slave owners and then the politicians and the elected officials and the folks who have been at the post and been traded in and out of those gates. Those people, the structures that they've established, and then the work that people do to continually uphold that. And that's not what the Black folks are. What I'm trying to say is the Black folks that are criticizing the validity of other Black folks based on things like how we speak, the music we listen to, and who we sleep with, or who our partner is, are doing the work of the colonizers for them. That's what I'm trying to say.
Hello? Say it again for the people in the back, Miss Pep. I don't think they heard you.
So who's Black now? Okay.
Right. I'm just saying, it's like you can't. Let's just like drop all of that. Stop doing the work for the colonizers and the mindset of the colonizers, and just like recognize that at the end of the day, we all look the same. So regardless of what I listen to, who I'm sleeping with, all of that, we are fighting the same shit. We are going
We're
through
certainly being oppressed the same way.
Shit.
Listen.
Right.
Alternatively Black. I want you all to spend this out, and let's have more conversations about this online on our Instagram. I want to hear in the comments what you all think. Under the comments on Bob's YouTube, and then come over to my YouTube and leave a comment, even though I got no video on there. And I want to hear from the Black folks first. What are your thoughts about alternatively Black, and what do you think? How does that mean to you? What does that mean to you? And have you experienced feeling alternatively Black? Have you experienced being labeled or categorized as alternatively Black? that's what I'm interested in here, because this is a conversation that has to keep going for sure. It's happening over on Black Twitter as we speak. And so, yeah, let's continue to interrogate these the what it means to be Black and how that helps or hinders our community and us as individuals, and then collectively as a community. Because if one of us is not doing well, then all of us are not doing well. And how we can evolve the thinking of Blackness, what it means to be Blackness, the idea of Blackness, to encompass everything in this universe. And then Blackness will be that much bigger. If Blackness is everything in the universe, then it is a bigger idea that's an undeniable idea, and it can't be alternative. It just won't be. And so, anyway, Cory, thank you so much for joining as co-host here. It was a pleasure.
Thank you
it's
for
not like you're
having
going
me.
Anywhere.
Likewise.
But I'm glad
I'll
that
see you next week.
listeners had the opportunity to hear your brilliance and, everything that you contributed. I'm so excited for our second season, and I'm excited that you are one of our producers. And, this show is you and Charlene, our other producer, of course, and Tracy, our other producer, and of course, you, the listeners. And so we're just really grateful. Who are we thanking, Cory?
Alrighty. Special thanks to our production team, Charlene Westbrook, Tracy Marquez, Amelia Ritaller, and me, Cory Nixon, and music by LaFemme Bear.
Thanks, everybody. See y'all later.